How's it going?
Good. You should be able to hear me, and you might get an echo from me because I do not have you in my headphones. So if you give me 1 second, I should be able to fix that.
Well, there we go. I'm not getting any echo. I can hear you great.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're not getting any echo, but let me just. Okay, now there should be extra no echo. So.
Yeah, you sound beautiful. I've been told that my camera quality and my mic quality are horrible, so you don't need to worry about yourself. It'll be bad no matter what.
Good. We're on even playing field then. Good.
There we go. So what do you want to talk about today?
So I mean, I'm happy to take this in any direction you wanted to. The reason I clicked on your stream is because I saw that it said atheism instead of just Protestantism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't exactly call myself an atheist. But I do definitely call myself an ex-Catholic. And I'm probably close enough to atheism for you and I to at least have a really good conversation about it if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And it's funny, what I was talking with Kate about the other day is that it seems like Catholic YouTube doesn't engage with like secularism, I'll say at least, very much. Catholic YouTube really only seems to engage with Protestant YouTube, and Protestant YouTube engages with like atheist YouTube, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So we were saying that we wish, because we are ex-Catholic non-Christians.
Yes.
And there doesn't seem to be a ton of content on Catholic YouTube. And then, you know, almost as if it's a sign, you have you put atheism in your video title.
Yeah.
So
maybe it's divine. Maybe something.
Hey, maybe.
Yeah. So when you said you're almost atheist, would you say, I'm assuming you don't mean like positive atheism, like that you're asserting there isn't a God, but maybe that you're unconvinced that there is one?
Yeah. So I would go as far as to say that I'm convinced things like I am convinced that like the texts that make up the Bible are, you know, like other ancient texts, right? I would go as far as to say that I don't think that there's anything special about the Bible. I'd go as far as to say that I don't like I actively don't believe in the God presented in the Old Testament, things like that. Where I stop short is saying that like I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that there's not some kind of cosmic force, so like, you know, Spinoza's God or whatever. Like that's where I just kind of stop short of calling myself like a full-blooded atheist. But I am convinced that Christianity is not true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Christianity and I think theism are two different things. I think it's best to convince someone of theism before going into Christianity, before going into Catholicism. And you said that Catholics don't really attack atheism as much as they should. I fully agree. Someone who does do a great job is Trent Horn. I think people are actually putting him down there. He had a conversation with Alex O'Connor, and I think Alex actually said that his conversation with Trent Horn was the closest he's ever come to being stumped as far as atheism goes. And I thought that was super interesting.
And then only, to argue against myself even more, like Jimmy Akin, my favorite thing that Jimmy Akin has ever done after his conversation with me, of course, was his debate with Bart Ehrman. So there's another example of Catholics, like, kind of engaging with like, non-Protestants. So, it certainly does happen. It just feels like the vast majority of Catholic YouTube is more geared towards Protestants.
Yeah, I think honestly, we probably do that because it's so much easier to convince someone like, hey, we all agree that this is correct. Look at these verses that obviously say that, Peter had the keys or whatever. And then sometimes Protestants will see that and they'll just be like, oh, okay, that's enough for me. Oftentimes not, but sometimes that happens.
Yeah, the way that I look at it almost is like, if you have this really big circle that is all of human belief, then you have this circle in here that's all Christian belief. And then you have this smaller circle that's all Catholic belief. So it's kind of like there's just a lot less work to be done, I guess, to get somebody from Protestantism to Catholicism than there is to get somebody from non-Christianity at all into Catholicism. It's just more.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I don't know if you can hear the noise on my end. It's I hope you can't.
Yeah, I'm not hearing anything. I'm just hearing your voice.
Good. Perfect. Sorry, I had a ringing. Um, but yeah, so if you're interested, we could talk a little bit about Catholicism and maybe some of the reasons why I don't think it's true. Um, if you're interested.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think it would be much better to start on theism as a whole than to go to Catholicism. I think especially with somebody who is an ex-Catholic like yourself, there's not going to be a lot of things that I could say that you haven't already heard. But I think as far as like the pool of philosophy itself, like somebody can always bring something new because philosophy can sometimes just be, hey, this is what I was thinking about in my bed last night. So I think we could probably have a more fruitful conversation if we were just addressing theism as a whole, but we could totally do Catholicism if you want.
Yeah, I'm happy to do theism. I just might not put up too much of a fight. The reason I don't call myself an atheist is because, yeah, I mean, maybe there is some kind of God out there. Now, if there is, I have a sneaking suspicion that this God is a lot more similar to something like gravity than it is to something like Yahweh. But that's kind of neither here nor there. But you might kind of go through all these theistic arguments, and I might be like, yeah, those all make sense to me. Great,
Yeah,
I might not really put up too much of a fight, in all honesty.
I'm I know that you said it's neither here nor there. I'm intrigued. What do you mean by the gravity thing?
Okay, so I'm a chemical engineer by education. So
Hmm.
I make a lot of like science analogies. So just try to bear with me. So according to the standard model of physics, there's four forces at work in the universe: earth, fire, water, and air. No, I'm just kidding. The four forces are the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity. That's it. Everything that's happening in the universe can be described in those four fundamental forces. Um, maybe we need a fifth one. Maybe we need this kind of like intentionality thing that's going on. Maybe. Now, I'm not saying, I'm certainly not proposing this as like a scientific theory or anything like that. Um, but maybe we need that kind of, fifth thing in the universe to kind of explain how everything happened the way that it did. Um, Now, that kind of explanation is going to fit in just fine with a lot of these kind of theistic arguments. Like if you're somebody who wants to point at fine tuning, for instance, I think that this kind of God solves the fine tuning problem just fine. But then it also doesn't fall prey to something like, yeah, but why is there so much suffering or whatever? And it's like, well, gravity doesn't care if we suffer, right?
Yeah.
Gravity just kind of pulls things together. And so maybe this God is like a force of the universe in that sense. Um, that would make sense to me because the more you learn about science, the more that I think that you realize that like you know electromagnetism, like you get to the bottom and you're like, it just is, man. Like it, like why is the gravitational constant equal to what it is? Well, it just is, man. Like, and you can't get any deeper than that to some extent. And so maybe God is like that, where like why are the constants of the universe, like they could be so many different ways, or why are they what they are? They just are, man. Like, I don't know, that kind of speaks to me a little bit. So that kind of God seems to solve a lot of the it seems to answer a lot of the arguments that seem to suggest that there is some kind of God, some kind of unmoved mover, right? Some kind of uncaused cause. This force of the universe model of God seems to kind of say, yeah, sure, those things are fine. And then also, oh, but what about the argument from evil? Well, this God also kind of solves that one. So I don't know. And again, I don't call myself a theist because I'm not settled enough on the matter to tell you like, yeah, this is definitely what I believe in. It's just something that I think is plausible. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're describing there, and it's not identical to, but it's somewhat parallel almost to an extrapolation of divine simplicity,
Hmm.
where God is the truth of the universe. God is the love of the universe. And that's almost the way I just phrased it. There's like a weird, like hippy dippy spiritual way. But I think that the fifth force could be the transcendent truth or the transcendent love, the transcendent even morality. And then the difference between what you're saying, what I'm saying is I also believe that that God is personal and intervenes in human life in some sort of way.
Yeah. I think that the doctrine of divine simplicity is actually one of those things that's like way more problematic for people who want to hold to it than they seem to want to admit to. Because things, so are you familiar with like modal collapse, for instance? We don't need to get into it, it's really philosophically dense. Um, but modal collapse is an argument that I think successfully says that, hey, look, if it is true that God's, he is divinely simple, his essence is simply his existence, um, then determinism is true. And if determinism is true, then I don't know. That doesn't seem very personal to me. It seems more like, I don't consider myself as having a personal relationship with like my computer, for instance.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I find divine simplicity to be like, on the one hand, I cheer. I say, yes, this looks like exactly what I was just talking about. This force of the universe almost. And then I hear other people talking about divine simplicity. I'm like, wait, that doesn't sound like what you're just talking about at all, And I kind of
Yeah.
throw up my hands in the air in frustration. But yeah, I do think you're right. I do think it is like divine simplicity.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned determinism because I think that does align a lot more with Catholic doctrine. And I know that we're getting into Catholicism, even though we didn't necessarily intend to. But because we have people like St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, they were firm believers in almost like this Calvinistic
Yeah.
viewpoint of predestination. And I
Mhm.
think the modern day apologist for Catholicism. Like I think like people like Jimmy Akin, I love him. I love Jimmy Akin. He's much smarter than I am. Same with Trent Horn. Absolutely love him. Much smarter than I am. But I think they undersell the position of Catholicism on predestination. I think historically as a church, we've held to a rather Calvinistic doctrine of predestination, not all five tenets of tulip, but predestination is something that's pretty historically rooted within the church.
I agree, and it almost seems like when Calvinism came along, there was like this equal and opposite reaction in the church to step away from it, um, even though that's what the church historically held to.
Mhm.
Um, so it almost seems like there was a movement within the church to be like, no, we are not like that. We are different. When I think the historical situation is a lot closer to Calvinism than I think a lot of Catholics are aware. I think you're right.
Yeah, no, and I really I like determinism a lot. It's a very hard pill to swallow at first, but I think that a lot of Catholicism actually does fall under it's able to be defended a lot better with a deterministic understanding of things. It's like if you take the eternal election of the saints, well, of course those saints can intercede, and of course they are venerated throughout the church because God superintended for those saints to be in that position. So it's not just like they quote unquote merited their way and they were just lucky and they had faith. No, it's because God intended for them to be there and to be venerated. This is His choice. There's also I recently debated an evangelical needgod.net, if you've ever heard of him. I
Yeah,
brought
I watched it. I watched the debate.
Yeah, in the Q&A, I mentioned like how Calvinism or their doctrine of predestination has actually been used to defend the sinlessness of Mary, because they were saying, well, the incarnation is an eternal action. It's an eternal understanding of the essence of God. And that means that the incarnation, being born of a woman, was intended before the fall ever happened. And so that means this incarnation, this idea of coming through a woman, would have had to be in some way going through without sin before it had ever occurred, unless you're willing to say that God purposefully is the author of evil. And I would say that even, hardcore Calvinists, superlapsarians would reject that idea.
Yeah. But so, or do you kind of just bite the bullet on like, yeah, no, God created people that were determined for hell, and like God knew this, and he created it. And so, do you just kind of bite the bullet on that? I'm not saying that God's responsible for their actions, but I'm saying that God knew that they were like, there was a 100% chance that they were going to hell, and God made them anyway. And that's just kind of like a bullet that you bite, I guess, as a deterministic Catholic.
I would say that I really like the way Paul talks about it in Romans 9. And I think that's kind of how I approach it too, is that he asks a lot more questions than he does give answers. And I think that, from a human perspective, that's the only thing we can do. He's like, okay, well, you're saying, wait, God predestined people to hell? And then Paul's just like, yeah, but who the heck are you to try and talk back to God? And I think that's kind of my position. Do I bite the bullet? Well, I'm not entirely sure how God's providence plays into human free will. I would agree from a simply like Aristotelian, like philosophical standpoint, it looks like we don't have free will at all. But there's also passages in the Bible where I think it kind of implies free will. So I don't know exactly where I stand fully.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, it I think you're right about it's funny, people talk about the Bible like it's a book, and it's not, it's a library, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so different books say different things, and like hey, maybe parts of the Bible are kind of leaning towards determinism, and maybe other parts are leaning more towards free will. I don't think those categories were really in the minds of the authors of all the different texts of the Bible. So I don't think it's entirely fair for us to be like uh in kind of reading determinism and free will into their writings necessarily. Like, we might not be doing Paul any favors by trying to read any, you know what I mean? But yeah, I do think that there are well, different authors, and different authors have different topics that they're trying to cover. So yeah, so I'll be honest and tell you that the idea that like a god would make someone who is determined to go to hell is like really, really difficult for me to wrap my head around, particularly when we also want to say that this God is all loving and stuff like that. Like that's something. I mean, and when I say difficult to wrap my head around, I'd go as far as to say that I can't see anything other than that being a direct contradiction. So that's like, I think, one of the things that kind of drives me away from the more Calvinistic brand of Christianity. Even though I also think that determinism is true. Now, obviously, I think determinism is true from like a completely different lens than you do. I just don't see room for free will in the laws of nature. But I guess that's kind of neither here nor there. It's funny that we're both determinists, but we're kind of coming at it from different angles.
Yeah, no, there's this guy on YouTube, I'm trying to remember his name. I think it's A Messenger of Truth. I disagree with him on a lot of things, but I would say maybe look into this. And obviously I'm not promoting false doctrines, but he holds to the biblical or anti-biblical in my point of view. He holds to annihilationism. He holds to total predestination and annihilationism. And I think that kind of reconciles what you're talking about a little bit. Where I think the problem that we have, or at least in our human minds with determinism, is eternal suffering. Like, it never ends. So when we say that God is all loving, from a divinely simplistic standpoint, we believe that that love also is God's justice. And so if he creates a wrath that is predestined for evil, well, it's only just for him to punish that thing for its wrath. And I think where the human mind struggles with that concept is, okay, but now they're going to suffer eternally for finite actions. But I think if it's annihilationism, you just die. You cease to exist. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that is necessarily as much of a human moral problem as, the eternal suffering standpoint.
Chris Date is another YouTube Christian theologian type dude who talks a lot about annihilationism. And honestly, the more that I read into annihilationism, the more that I think I'm sympathetic to people like Chris Date's arguments. He looks at the Greek of the New Testament, and he comes up with all these reasons why he thinks that annihilationism is more biblical than eternal conscious torment. And I'm not a theologian. I don't read or speak any Greek in the slightest. So I kind of just say, okay, Chris, sounds good, buddy.
Yeah.
But I find annihilationism to be a much more compelling, I should say, idea than eternal conscious torment. Now, unfortunately, Catholics cannot be annihilationists. Catholics also can't be universalists.
Yes.
Yeah, it's that right. That's in the syllabus of errors, I'm pretty sure. So it's off the table to the Catholic, which is unfortunate. That'd be an interesting topic, though. I mean, one of my big criticisms of Catholicism is the way that the Catholic Church has kind of boxed itself into certain corners, I think. And if this is like if you have other people you want to talk to besides me and you need to kick me off, by all means, please do. Because this is kind of like a complete, about face here. But I do think that the way that the Catholic Church has boxed itself into a corner over the last 2,000 years is one of the least attractive things about the Catholic Church to me. Do you know what I mean when I say box itself into a corner? Yeah.
So we've declared a lot of things in the philosophical interpretation of God. You can't really
just philosophy too.
There's a lot of doctrines. And I think you can look at that. It's either super compelling to join Catholicism or it'll turn you off from Catholicism. So I really liked how they've quote unquote boxed themselves into a corner, because I wanted answers as a Protestant. I was like, okay, well, how are these books supposed to be in the Bible? How do I know that these are the infallible ones and these other ones aren't? And so the certainty that the Catholic Church lays on certain things is what drew me in. But I can also see how from an outside perspective, you're like, wait, you guys are literally just saying everything and you have to agree down this narrow line. I can see where that's problematic from an outside perspective for sure.
I mean, it was problematic from an inside perspective for me too. For you might not know this about me. So I was born into the FSSP, which is the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter. So my grandparents founded the FSSP chapel that I grew up in.
Wow.
I went to school there for 1st through 8th grade. I went to mass like every morning. So I went to mass 6 days a week growing up. I went to confession once a week. I received all my sacraments. And I was Catholic until I was 22. I'm about to turn 30 for reference. But I even got married at age 22 in the Catholic Church. So my confirmation name is John Vianney, the patron saint of priests, because I thought I wanted to become a priest. Obviously, I got married at 22, so I didn't become a priest, right? Mm-hmm. But my cousin is at the FSSP seminary in Nebraska. So like my family is like, the real deal. And I was the real deal, right? I was really Catholic. So my point in kind of laying out, I guess, the Catholic credentials there is just from the inside, I think it was even kind of tough for me to swallow. Now, to kind of let your audience know too, the FSSP. So like I grew up believing that evolution was false, for instance, that the earth was 6,000 years old, like things like that. And I would hear this from the pulpit, right? And I'm not that much older. Geez, Noah, I might be like 10 years older than you or something like that. But it makes me feel old. But this is just like, I'm not old is my point, right? I'm still 29. So when I say that I grew up being taught that evolution is false and the earth is 6,000 years old, sometimes I feel like people would like hear that and assume that I'm 60 years old, but I'm not. All that to say, the church boxed itself into a corner, not only on philosophical topics, but also like if you read like the early Pontifical Biblical Commission texts, I'm talking about from like the 1910s and the 1920s, their language on like did Moses write the Pentateuch is like pretty strong. They say like, yeah, Moses was the principal author. And then you actually start getting into biblical scholarship and you learn things like, well, shoot, Moses was supposed to live 500 years before the Hebrew language was even invented. Yeah. So it's like, oh, wow. Like that's kind of, how did he write that then? So there's all these things like that where, and now it's funny, the modern church, the post-Vatican II church completely ignores the early PBC, Pontifical Biblical Commission writings. But communities like mine don't. Communities like mine, the FSSP and the SSPX, and to a degree, the SSPV, all of these kind of more trad communities, they double down on those areas. And so in some sense, I think that these trad communities are, they box themselves into a corner even harder than like the rest of the church. But it's consistent, at least. You know what I mean?
I would say that word consistent is concerning. Because I agree that if you're looking from like, this is taught clearly here, this is taught clearly here, this is taught clearly here, and then like it's a continual line. Yes, but I don't think that that's how the Catholic Church has ever worked. I think the problem that a lot of like SSPX guys fall into, like these super trad, like almost LARPers of Catholicism, they're like, this is what was taught in the early 20th century, And that's what was taught to the apostles. It's like,
Yes.
no,
Yeah.
things have always been evolving. We
Yeah.
literally state this. I think Florence says the ever living, evolving church. And it's not that we're changing doctrines, but there's this continual reinterpretation as the human race figures out more, because it's God working in cooperation. So the word consistent is always hard for me, because I think that actually the Vatican II sect of Catholicism is more consistent than the super trad guys, because we're continuing to evolve as the church always has.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And yeah, it is funny. So much of like the trad movement, um, they think that, like, they would go back to, the second, third, fourth century, and they would see exactly the mass that they have and
Yeah.
everything. And it's like, no. You could go back maybe like 200-300 years, and you'd see that mass. That's about it. Like prior to that, no, it's entirely different. So that is a very, very good point. However, and this kind of speaks to the boxing yourself into the corner type thing too, is that um the church has existed for so long that, the Pontifical Biblical Commission itself, which has only existed for 130 years or something like that, right? Because the PBC was founded, maybe a little bit more than that, was founded like right at the tail end of the 19th century or whatever, right? It was like Pope Leo the 13th and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. Less than 150 years. The PBC itself has explicitly contradicted its earlier teachings. And they said, like, we know that we're doing this. It's just we know better now. Like,
Yeah.
by the 1950s, the PBC was saying, don't listen to the PBC from the 1910s. Like in 40 years, we've learned a lot. And to some degree, I want to say, hey, good job. But then you read in, I forget the name. It's like on the study of the diligence of study or something like that. It's some encyclical from the 1890s or something. But the Pope who instituted the PBC said that he was instituting that he declares and defines, right? So that's supposed to be the papal infallibility language. And don't forget, 1890s, right in the wake of Vatican I, right? So he declares and defines that he is instituting this organization, the Pontifical Biblical Commission, and he declares and defines that the PBC will safeguard from error, the faithful on any matter regarding study of the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this, at least, if not literally infallible, but again, declare and define, you have this very authoritative declaration that the PBC is going to exist and it's going to be free from error about biblical scholarship, right? That's in the 1890s. Less than 20 years later, it says like, oh yeah, Moses wrote the entire Pentateuch, right? It says things like, you cannot deny that Genesis is history. Like you can say it also contains like allegory and stuff, but no, it is history, right? As well as things that like, it's, the traditional authorship view is correct, right? And the modern church also really doesn't defend that. Like popes don't defend that anymore. So you have all of these PBC rulings in the 1910s and 20s, and then by the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, the PBC is explicitly saying, "Never mind, guys, ignore all that stuff." And by the way, the head of the PBC today is a woman. Like you think that would have flown in 1910? Absolutely not. And so to the reason I bring all this up is because the church appears to box itself into a corner infallibly. And then sometimes it walks itself back from these seemingly infallible declarations. And I'm kind of sitting here like, wait, whoa, hold on. I thought that you guys were not supposed to be able to do this. But I don't know. It just kind of seems like the church changes,
Yeah. So the PBC, from what I'm hearing, is a very interesting point. I've never heard anyone make that before. My mind kind of goes a few places automatically as a Catholic apologist. And it's going to seem like I'm weaseling my way out, but this is just like kind of how I think now.
Thinking out loud and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that Vatican I defines the ability to declare something as infallible as so long as it's in alignment with the history of the church, or with, as long as it's not in contradiction to other things. So, for example, Pope Leo couldn't get up there right now and say, hey, by the way, Jesus isn't God. That's binding to all Catholics. Bam, you guys are done for. The statement that you just said was made about the PBC seems to be like infallibility was trying to be given to something in a way I don't think the church has ever intended or even maybe allowed for it to be.
So what do you think about like the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith?
You might have to
Oh,
extrapolate a little
sorry.
more for me.
So,
Yeah.
so there's this organization that is today referred to as the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, uh, the DDF. It only the DDF, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, is a new name for an organization that up until 2021 or something like that, like recent, it was called the CDF, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and the CDF is the name that this organization had from like 100 years or something like that. Like it was like the early 1900s or something. But this organization was founded in like the 16th century or something. And from the 16th century to like the 20th century, it was called it was called the Holy Inquisition. Like, so the Inquisition, and people think that the Inquisition is something other than what it really
Yeah.
was. And then, hold on, pause. The Inquisition tried to kick out like hundreds of thousands of Jews from Spain out of their ancestral homes, and that sucks. Like, don't do that, people. Come on. That being said, the Inquisition also didn't like execute millions of people or whatever. Like, people have false ideas of what the Inquisition was.
Yes.
And that's the Spanish Inquisition, which was also a government-run Inquisition, not really affiliated with the Vatican's Inquisition. Anyway, this is a whole big thing. There's similar names for two kind of separate but related bodies. The Spanish Inquisition is not the same as what is today called the DDF, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. Anyway, back when this thing was created in like the 16th century or whatever, it was given the authority, like when the DDF can say things with virtual infallibility. Now, when I mean virtual infallibility, the DDF, for instance, in the 1990s, the DDF wrote a document that said like the following things are infallible. And they said when the church pronounces these things, they're infallible. And like canonizations was included in there and like things like that. And then the DDF signed off on it. And the DDF is made up of bishops from around the world. And then they typically will submit their documents to the Pope. And so the Pope also signs off on it. And so the generally accepted wisdom is that if the DDF says something and they say that it's going to be infallible, it's pretty much infallible. Now, whether or not it's really infallible is debated by theologians. And I'm not a theologian, so I'm not going to tell you what to think. But my point is that the DDF and the PBC are pretty similar, with the big difference being the PBC was established in the 1890s or the 1900s or something like that. And the DDF was established back in like the 16th century. So that was, sorry, I'm so wordy.
No, this is really good. I'm learning a lot of things that with the PBC. So you mentioned with the DDF that it's bishops, and I think that would fall under universal ordinary magisterium as far as Vatican I goes. So they're teaching things continually. Is that the same with the PBC? Is it bishops that are coming together?
So here's what's funny is that it was created that way. So in the 1890s or the 1910s or whatever, it was created. There was only a handful of bishops, but they were from all over the world or whatever. And when I say a handful, I mean like a dozen or something like that.
Okay.
And they would have people working under them, like scholars and stuff working under them, like advising them and stuff. But those bishops alone were the DDF. That changed right around Vatican II. It might have happened a little bit before Vatican II. It might have happened like the 1950s. Where all of a sudden non-bishops were allowed onto the DDF. I'm sorry, onto the PBC.
Yeah.
But at the time of these early PBC declarations about Mosaic authorship, about the historical nature of Genesis, it was only bishops. There were no non-bishop members at that time.
That's super interesting. I would like to see the timeline to where, it was just bishops and now we're integrating non-bishops. Because I feel like once you start integrating non-bishops, and not to come across in any way that I'm really not attending, don't hear what I'm not saying, but once we start having female leaders within the PBC, that would definitely take away from the supposed, and I haven't read that statement, infallibility that was papally declared about the PBC. So I would just need to look into more the timeline of when these things happened to be able to give more of a response. But this is super interesting stuff.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things, and you know what's funny, you and I might look at the same piece of data, and that piece of data is the early PBC says that Moses, he was the primary author. Maybe other people made little additions, but Moses was the primary author of the first 5 books of what we call the Old Testament, right? The Pentateuch or the Torah. And Pentateuch is, if you actually read the document, they keep on referring to it as the Pentateuch. And I'm sitting here like, guys, the Pentateuch is the Greek version. Like, obviously Moses didn't write the Greek version, right? Like,
yes.
Anyway, but they say
The 5 books is what's
yes,
being.
they mean
Yes.
they mean Genesis,
Yes.
Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. But regardless, I look at that and I'm like, and let's say that we agree, just for the for fun. Let's say that you and I agree that this is supposed to be infallible. I look at that and I'm like, oh wow, the church infallibly made a mistake. And you might, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, so you can tell me if I'm wrong here. You might look at the same data and be like, oh shoot, I guess Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. That's okay. So the difference between you and I hate to pull this card, but I've been blessed with an abundance of divine experiences where even like if the Catholic Church got out today and declared like, hey, by the way, the earth was definitively made in 6 days. Also the sky is kind of green half of the time. Like if they said all this crazy stuff, I would genuinely consider adhering to that and putting down my understanding of how the world works for that, because I've just had so many things that are, in my view, that had to be God. And that had to be through the Catholic Church. Like the intercession of Saint Therese has done wonders for me, especially when I was discerning Eastern Orthodoxy. Saint Therese being a Roman saint, like there's just been a lot of awesome things. So if the Catholic Church said that, yeah, I probably would say, okay, Moses did this thing. But I agree with what you're saying is that we would interpret that completely differently.
Yeah, and for the record, I actually think that personal experience is the best reason to believe anything. So, I don't believe that the sky is green, for instance. I think it's blue. Why? Personal experience, right? I mean, I do believe that this is a cup of coffee, even though it's 7:30 p.m. for me. I'm on Eastern time. I don't know where you're at, but why do I think that this is really a cup of coffee? Because I mean, I can look in the cup and I can see the coffee. It's personal experience. Personal experience drives the overwhelming majority of my beliefs. I do believe some things that I have no personal experience about. I do believe that like the moon is however many million miles, thousands of miles. I have no idea. But I do believe that what the astronauts tell us about the moon is correct. However far the distance between the Earth, I have no idea if that's true. I've never been to the moon. I've never traveled that distance. I believe it anyway. Besides things like that, everything I believe is personal experience. And so if I was on the road to Damascus and I had this Damascus road experience, like Paul tells us he had, I'd believe too. I think that's a great reason. And sometimes people think that I'm being sarcastic when I say this, and I'm not. I think that personal experience is like the best reason to pretty much believe like anything. Like you couldn't convince me that this isn't a cup of coffee. Like you couldn't do it. Because I have personal experience of this cup of coffee. And so like, I don't know if I had personal experience of like, this cup, your philosophical arguments wouldn't work on me because I'm having a personal experience with this cup of coffee right now. And so I wouldn't expect, if you truly had this kind of experience, then I don't think that you should be moved by like a philosophical argument. Like you could look at the most philosophically advanced argument for atheism. And if I were you and I had this experience, I'd be like, psh, your philosophical arguments mean nothing to me. I have personal experience.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not being sarcastic. Sometimes I say this sometimes that people are like, oh, they think I'm mocking them or something. I'm not. I 100% believe that personal experience is the best reason to believe anything.
Yeah. No, I what you're saying kind of reminds me of the Matrix, where they're trying to explain to Neo, like, hey, this fake. And he doesn't believe them until they actually step outside and he has that personal experience of now your personal experience is contradicting prior personal experience and it's all working together. So yeah, I fully agree with what you're saying. I think that I think Cade, Gay Trad, holds to a very similar position. I think even Alex O'Connor has made some very similar statements. And I think that that's kind of the peak of this ecumenical dialogue between theism and atheism, is if you come to understand, like, yeah, this guy has truly believed that he has seen God, talk to saints in heaven. You're not going to convince him otherwise. Now we should just try and understand each other better. I think that's the best thing that we can do. And this conversation, I think, is a great example of, not being like, I'm right, you're wrong, but just let's understand each other.
I'm not gonna lie, I can't stand like debate bro culture. I really can't. I've participated in a number of like debates like with a formal structure, and I always walk away from them thinking like there's no reason that this couldn't have been a dialogue like what you're doing, like what you and I are doing right now. I don't really yell like ever. I'm really hard to make angry. Like I don't get angry. I don't yell. I don't think I'm like scary or hard to talk to or anything like that. So I much prefer conversations like the one that you and I are having right now to like the kind of debate culture anyway. And I think that they're like not only do I find them more pleasant, but I think that they're better at I come to a better understanding of my conversation partner's position than I do of my debate opponent's position, if that makes sense. So yeah, I agree. At the end of the day, we can show each other philosophical arguments that we're blue in the face, but we can't give each other personal experiences. That's the thing about personal experiences, is that they're personal. So
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm 100% right there with you.
Well, I know that we just talked about how much we dislike debate culture. I would like to run a cool, and I wouldn't even call it an argument. It's more like a philosophical framework of how, as a theist, I view the world. It's pulled a lot here. I have it here. It's pulled a lot from Summa Contra Gentiles. It's kind of an extrapolation of Aquinas's explanation of how he came to God, came to fully believe in quote unquote prove God. Obviously, he didn't do that. We would all agree on a lot more if he did. But I'd like to run it past you if you're willing to hear it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Okay. And this does change a little bit every time I do it. So you're going to see I'm kind of spitballing a little bit on this, but it's an overarching thought experiment almost. So premise one, and feel free to interject anytime you think that one of these premises is a leap or a stretch or not fully agreed upon by the both of us. Because then if we get to like the later part, the conclusion, you're like, well, actually, premise one's kind of problematic. So let me know right away. Don't feel like you're interrupting anything. So premise one, everything that is made of parts has potency.
I'm instead of interrupting, I do want to hear the whole argument. But I don't think that like the scholastic model of reality is actually true. So when I hear words like potency, when I hear words like substance and accidents, right, and essences, I don't think that those things exist. Like I don't think that they're real. So it like there's going to be a big language barrier, I think. But I'm still interested to hear your whole pitch. So
okay. Well, again, don't think of this as a pitch.
I'm sorry, that was the wrong word.
Yeah, no, you're fine. We can maybe redefine those words. I didn't even define them in the first part. Parts, and I know that you said you don't agree with substance, so I'm trying to figure out how to define a part. This is reminding me, I just watched Alex O'Connor and Vsauce talk about mereology. Yeah, and like so, do things even exist?
I am a mereological nihilist.
Okay.
So like I think that simples exist, whatever the simples are, right? Like are they quarks, are they leptons, whatever, I don't know. I think that those exist, and then I think that everything else is combinations of those things. I mean, that's like, we can observe that to be the case. And I think that's fine. Like some people get all bent out of shape about that. But yeah, so I am a mereological nihilist. So I'm like Alex and Michael from Vsauce in that sense.
That is perfect, actually, because that makes this so much simpler.
Oh, good.
Because then we don't have to go into mereology. So parts, I'm going to define parts as simples. And then something being made up of parts is just any collection of more than one simple. And it doesn't even have to be this is collected in a physical sense, but when we are looking at it as a collection of simple things. Okay, so I'm going to write that down so that we don't forget it. Parts equals collection of simples.
I thought you said
Um,
that the ports were the simples, and then like a compound object.
yes,
Would
yes,
be,
yes.
yeah,
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
No, all good,
Okay,
all good.
okay. And then potency, I'm going to define as requiring an explanation. Does that work for you?
So I guess to some degree, I don't think that anything requires explanation, right? Like explanation is like what humans do, right? Like we explain things. But I think that things were happening way before humans were around to observe them. Um, and so in a large, to a large degree, those things didn't need explanation. I mean, things happen. Things happened way before humans were on planet Earth. Things happened before
Mhm.
planet Earth was formed. Um, and I don't know if that required explanation per se. There were no things
Yeah.
around to explain it.
When I say explanation, and again, we're going to have to go through and define like the whole English dictionary here. Um, my phone, pretend that my phone is just a collection of simples.
Mhm.
And that the things I'm about to say are just like the things that make up the universe itself. There's a camera, there's volume button, there's power button. Those are parts that I'm viewing as this collection of my phone. And they are in a specific spot within that collection. So when I say something's made up of parts, I'm referring to like not in a physical sense, but how they are arranged in a transcendent way almost. There has to be a quote unquote explanation, or there has to be a reason for why they're in that arrangement and not any other arrangement. So that's what I'm defining potency as, is this sort of requiring an explanation. Does that kind of track a little bit?
I think so. There's a really good paper on mereology. It's called Against Parthood by Ted Sider. And the language that Ted Sider keeps on using over and over and over again in that paper is he talks about mereological simples arranged Noah-wise, and mereological simples arranged Kevin-wise, and arranged coffee cup-wise, and arranged phone-wise, and all that stuff. So if that's kind of what you're talking about, then I think I'm on board.
That is perfect. Okay. So I would define potency in that way as it's arranged this way, Noah wise. Why is it not arranged Kevin wise? But I think there's also a definite truth about how certain things are arranged. So we can get to premise 2 now that we're in somewhat of an agreement on premise 1. The universe as a whole. When I say universe, I'm talking to all of the simples that make up everything, every single simple that is in existence. Even if the universe is infinite, we're taking the infinite number of simples. They are arranged in a specific way. There we go.
No problems. No problems with that.
Writing it down. Okay. Just a little check mark next to it. He didn't hate that one. Okay. Therefore, the arrangement of these simples, the holistic view of the universe, everything that does exist has potency and requires some sort of quote explanation for the way that they are arranged currently.
Maybe I can restate the premise for you the way that I understood it, because I think I agree, but I want to make sure.
Yes.
So this premise is essentially saying that all of the simples in the universe have a location.
Yes. Okay.
All the simples have a location.
Okay.
The simples arranged Kevin wise are here, and the simples arranged Noah wise are there.
Yeah, and for people watching who maybe are losing our weird abstract words that we're using, this part of the universe is in this part of the universe are right here. They are this way currently, but they could be totally this way.
Ooh. So
Okay,
here's
let's
where
hear
we
it.
might actually disagree.
Okay.
Oh, and I might be able to win you over. Let's see. So if determinism is true,
Mm-hmm.
then all of the simples are where they simply must be.
Yes, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I have
Okay.
no problem with the simples being exactly where they would. And so when I say they could be here, I'm more so referring to the determinism, this determined path was at some point determined by something else. That's kind of where this is all funneling back to. So they are this way right now, but it's imaginable for them to be this way.
Um, I agree with the second one, but with the first one, I'm actually not so confident.
Okay,
What I mean by that
extrapolate
is,
a little more on that.
yeah. So I can imagine things being different than how they are. Like I can imagine that. So I was born in New Jersey, but I could imagine being born in New York. Right. I
Mhm.
can imagine that. Um, However, the previous statement was that, and forgive me if I just plain old misheard you. Um, but the previous statement was like the the conditions that determined that I would be born in New Jersey could have been different, such that I could have been born in New York
Mhm.
had those initial conditions been different. That's the part that I'm not very confident about. Um, Only because I don't I don't actually know if it could have been different. Like as far as I'm aware, we've only done this whole thing once,
Yeah.
right? Like we've only, as far as I can see, we did it. There's one universe, right? That's And I think that the whole multiverse thing that like certain physicists will talk about is an attempt to answer that intuition, like that intuition that I could have been born in New York. Oh, well, how do
Mhm.
we describe that? Oh, multiverses and stuff. I don't see evidence for those. And so I'm not at all confident that I could have been born in New York. I can imagine being born in New York, but as far as I'm aware, we've only done this whole creating a universe thing once. So I don't know if it could have been different. Maybe,
Yes.
but I don't know. You know what I mean?
I would agree with you. I took a little bit of a leap there. And this is kind of the spitballing thing I was talking about. Because everybody, in a very fun way, disagrees with these premises in a very different way every single time. Because, like, a lot of people don't hold to determinism. So they have no problem with me saying, oh, this could have
Yes.
been in another way. I took a leap there. I should have remembered that you said you believe in determinism. So when I say, I'm trying to think of this, this is kind of where the whole argument funnels. Here they are. I can imagine them this way. It was determined to be this way. Why wasn't it determined to be this way? And let me clarify a little bit more, because that's more of a question than a conclusion. Because the parts in the universe, in this holistic view of all parts, are arranged a certain way, it begs the question of the determinism that we're discussing. There needs to be an explanation, and quote explanation, for why the determinism arranged these parts in the way that they are. And that goes back up to premise one: parts fully imply potency. It means that there is this potency, and there needs to be an explanation, quote explanation, going on for why the determinism of our parts are the way that they are.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm entirely on board. And I think that like the physicist type that I was talking about earlier, would say, oh, well, yeah, that's just the initial conditions, man. Like the initial conditions of the universe are exactly what determined,
Mm-hmm.
um, determined that, here and here instead of here and here. Like the initial conditions are exactly what did that. Um, Now I might look at that and I might say something like, well, don't you think it's awful convenient that the initial conditions were such that you and I are having this conversation right now? Like, doesn't that seem like pretty freaking weird, dude? Like, isn't that like a little strange that it worked out
Mm-hmm.
so well? Um, and to that point, that's where I find myself very sympathetic to this fifth force of the universe concept of a god. You know what I mean? But I might be jumping ahead. So let me just back up and say,
Yes,
I think I'm on
yes.
board. I think I'm on
So,
board so far.
so I like what you brought up about the initial conditions there, because that word initial means beginning. That means there was a start. Could you, and without getting too far ahead, because this could go a million different places, could you maybe explain a little more what you mean by initial conditions.
Yeah. So the way that scientists talk about the start of the universe was that time didn't exist. And then time started. And at t equals 0, there were certain conditions. I'm a terrible engineering student. Well, because I haven't been a student in 8 years ago. But let me look up the gravitational constant real quick. It's not 9.8 meters per second squared. That's what gravity is on Earth. So the gravitational constant is approximately 7 times 10 to the negative 11th meters cubed per kilogram second. That's the number that I couldn't remember. It's 6.6743 times 10 to the negative 11. Why? Like, why
Yes.
is gravity equal to that? I think that at some point the scientist says, it just was, man. Like, that's just how the cookie crumbled.
Yeah.
and I think that I'm justified in kind of getting frustrated with that kind of answer and saying, like, well, that doesn't seem satisfactory, right?
Mhm.
And so that's where this kind of fifth force idea comes from.
Yeah.
But again,
That's where I'm going too.
yeah, cool.
Surprisingly, as the theist. And so the question, I really like how you phrased it. It just is. That's how theists talk about God. And it's so interesting to me when like this um, atheistic viewpoint gets to that point. They're saying, I'll say it's just is at this natural point, but I refuse to go beyond it. Even though I think the next step is okay, time didn't exist and then it did. And that word and then implies time, which is very hard to even describe this. But if time exists and there's already is a weird word, these initial conditions, for me, those initial conditions are parts in a way. And so it kind of makes me ask the question, okay, what determined these initial conditions? And that's where I think that the truth of God, the law of God, the God that is the law itself in a logic way, kind of comes in because it just is. That's the I am that I am. I think that's kind of where all of this plays into itself. And not to quote the Bible, because we're not talking about necessarily the Christian God, but just this theistic mindset of time exists, time begins to exist. There's things that are already there, not material things necessarily, but laws. There's truths. And I think that's where the God aspect kind of comes into things.
Yeah, and I find myself, I feel maybe a little bit like a broken record, but I find myself very like sympathetic to the model of God that kind of posits God as the fifth force, or maybe like, the force that sets the four fundamental forces or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Um I find myself very sympathetic to that. Because I don't think that there is a very satisfying answer to why gravity is 7 times 10 to the negative 11 meters cubed per kilogram second. Like, that's a random number, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
why? But that just so happens to be that in combination with the constants of electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force or the weak nuclear force, like atoms can actually stick together. like that's awful convenient, isn't it?
Yeah.
If they were different atoms, couldn't electrons and protons wouldn't have the right charges to actually attract each other, and then you wouldn't have one hydrogen atom or yeah, like a hydrogen atom and an oxygen atom. They wouldn't want to link up and form water and stuff like that. So yeah, it just seems awful convenient unless we posit something that makes it so. You know what I mean? And so positing the kind of the God force to make it so. Yeah, sure, I don't know. It seems just as plausible to me, at least just as plausible as that there is no answer to the question of why gravity is what it is. Like they both seem reasonable to me. So I don't get mad at people who kind of posit this. I mean, I don't get mad at anybody, but I don't get upset when people posit this kind of this God force. You know what I mean? Now, one thing that I will want to push back a little bit on, and this might be a whole other topic, and we don't have to go down this road, but I just don't think that the God of the Old Testament or the New Testament is what we just described, like in the slightest.
Yeah.
And I things like God talking, that alone is like, wait a minute, like, doesn't talking imply like beginning and ending of utterances and stuff like that?
Mm.
And like forces, like gravity doesn't begin and end, gravity just is. Um, and so like the question, is God talking under the doctrine of divine simplicity, doesn't really have an answer, because God is kind of always talking and also never talking. Like God doesn't change at all. So he doesn't go from a state of talking to not talking, you know? Um, God, when he's walking through the garden, walking, God shouldn't be able to go from a state of not walking to walking to not walking. That shouldn't be possible, right? All these things. The Old Testament describes him as getting angry. It describes him as all sorts of things. And like none of that. And now I think that a lot of philosophically minded Christians can kind of just chalk that up to 5th century BC imaginations, right?
Yeah, like
Um,
anthropomorphization is
exactly.
typically the common response. Oh yeah, God was angry in the sense that there was guilt felt by the Israelites under the presence of the eternal God who does not change. The immutability of God still applies, but it's the way that it's interacting with the world. It's the common apologetic response. But I'm sure you know that.
Yeah, of course. And I guess I just don't find that response very compelling, because the texts of the Old Testament seem to match all the other ancient texts that we have, right? And I mean, even the New Testament. Um, and like the incarnation kind of seems problematic, because like, what do you mean? Like, God didn't used to be man, but now he is? Like, isn't that a change? Like, wait a
Mm,
minute.
so I have an LDS friend, and that was his, like, I gotcha on Catholicism.
Oh,
And
really?
it stumped me for a while. He said the incarnation, because they don't believe in this immutable God, right? They believe that,
Oh, true. Yeah, they
yes,
believe that God used to be a human, like God the Father used to be, or not. I'm not an LDS person, so you'll have to forgive
yes.
me. What exactly did they believe?
So it's very hard to say what they
Okay,
believe, and
never
and
mind.
there's a lot of the LDS members themselves even have a little bit of frustration with what the LDS church is willing to, like, hey, this is how we phrase it. A lot of the language, like, oh, God used to be a guy, or we can be gods of our own planets. It's somewhat of a cartoonish representation. It's kind of like saying, like, oh, Christians think they can go up and bounce on clouds all day.
Okay,
Like in a sense, yes, but like really no.
right.
And so they believe a lot of very interesting things. They actually leave a lot open ended. So they believe in like this exaltationist theosis, and that's what the God of the Old Testament kind of went through. But previous to that, there's like kind of like this line of gods almost, and they don't know where the God of the Old Testament actually came from. They haven't stated that officially yet.
Mm,
And so I think that's super interesting stuff. But this LDS guy, he comes on, he says, okay, well, you believe in this immutable God. How is it possible that this God became man? And that actually allowed me to learn a lot about what Catholics actually believe about the incarnation, about the perfect nature of God, and what it means for something to not change. I learned so much about this, and it's a very fun topic.
is it possible to distill it down into a conversation, or not really?
We can attempt. We can maybe have like I'll say what I believe, you say why you don't agree with it, and then maybe I can give like a response. But it
I'm even
probably,
happy just to hear you explain it, and then I won't say anything. I'm happy.
yeah.
I'm
Well,
curious, really.
yeah, no, like if there's something you want to say, don't feel like you got to be completely silent though. Okay, so the idea that God became man is actually the essence, and like it kind of plays into this essence energies distinction. So it's an eternal action of God, but as Catholics, we believe that the eternal actions are also the essence. Right? We believe those are identical things. And so the incarnation where he becomes man is more not so from a godly perspective he became man, but rather how the earth how the world, the creation interacted with God. So it's not that God himself is changing, but rather that the earth kind of lined up in a way where when God's essence, as it has eternally been, when it was there, the earth kind of like molded itself to that, to where God became man.
So this is almost stay with me for a second. This is almost kind of the same response as we talked about earlier with like the yes, no, God wasn't really talking to Adam and Eve. This is like an
Yes.
yeah. And what's kind of happening here with Jesus is like, with the incarnation, I should say, is like it's almost like our reality has to anthropomorphize God almost, because God's bigger than our reality. And so like God he's becoming man right now, like in his, because that's what divine simplicity says. Like God is always everything all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
God is becoming man right now. But then like that doesn't make sense with the physics of the universe that we live in. So like our universe almost had to like anthropomorphize God at a certain time or something like that. Is that almost, am I onto something?
It's right there that and I don't want to say the universe changes to God, but we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I just don't have big enough words to describe it correctly. But yeah, no, I think you're definitely understanding the belief system, at least, and I'm sure you've actually thought about this yourself as a Catholic, or an ex-Catholic, but it's very interesting stuff. I fully agree. And so, yeah, I would say my current position, the Thomistic position, is that the universe aligned itself in a way to where it was, quote, viewing the divine essence, that it appeared so God becoming man. And it's not to take away from the fact that God truly did become man, but rather that's an eternal action that has always been and is happening and was in the past, is in the future. Yeah. And we're just viewing it now in 33 AD.
Yeah. Yeah. And to me, like, this isn't any more or less like difficult to parse than the idea that God is talking to Adam and Eve right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to me, those two things are equally kind of difficult for me to accept. Well, I mean, I probably should say I don't think that this is true, right? But if I was going to accept one, I would accept the other, right? Like, I don't think that one is better or worse than the other, right? Like, if you accept divine simplicity, and this is kind of my whole thing about divine simplicity, is I feel like divine simplicity is actually like way more of a, and I don't mean this in like a negative sense, but like a bullet to bite, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like divine simplicity obligates people who accept it to a lot more than the average person who accepts divine simplicity seems to understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, fully agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm formulating a little bit of an analogy. I'm a big analogies guy.
They help.
And I might say something completely heretical. That's the downfall of analogies in God. Sort of imagine, as far as like the eternal actions of God, you're sitting on a trolley or like a safari ride almost, and it's going at a constant pace.
Pull the lever, hit the 5 people.
What's that?
Oh, sorry. I said I'll pull the lever. I'll hit the 5 people. Oh, sorry. Wrong trolley. Sorry.
Okay. Oh boy, we're getting into something. You're sitting on the trolley. You're looking out at the landscape. You have these blinders on almost, where you can only see what's directly in front of you. You can't turn your head. You're just looking out straight. Right now, you're looking out at a zebra. There's a zebra standing there. And then you keep going. And now there's nothing. Oh, but now there's a lion. You keep passing and you're only able to look in this one direction. You're looking at the whole landscape. That zebra was already there. That lion has always been there. And not always, but in this
the analogy, the lion is an internal lion.
Yes. The tree has always been there. And so you are changing, that the ride that you're going on is changing, but it appears to you, oh wait, there's a zebra now. That this landscape is giving me a zebra. Oh wait, now there's a lion. I'm seeing a lion. And so I think that's kind of how we can understand the eternal actions of God. Is God is the zebra right now. God is the lion right now. God is the tree right now. We're just looking with these blinders on and we're seeing it within time, even though he's outside of time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that if I was Catholic and trying to make sense of all this, that is how I would think about it. As someone who doesn't feel obligated, like I feel free to disagree, right, with the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And so I look at something like, you know, is God talking to Adam right now in the garden? I can quite happily say no, God, no, that is not currently happening. And the Catholic does have to say yes. Mm-hmm. God's doing it. So God, the Catholic has to bite that bullet, right? The Catholic has to say that God is becoming man right now. God is, just pick anything in the Bible, and God is doing that right now, including God is talking and also not talking, which is like, I don't know how that can be parsed out.
Well, I think going back to my stupid safari analogy, well, there's an animal here and there's an animal not here. It's both, right? God's talking, he's not talking. And God's not made up of parts, which is where it gets super hairy here. Or at least according to me. I don't know. It depends on who you ask. But yeah, I think that it can be both, but also this word that we're using, God is talking right now. Well, what does right now even mean for God? Because he's supposedly outside of time. Like, what does he was talking to Adam and Eve mean? Well, I don't know. I'm not God. And I think that's where these conversations, and I know it seems like a cop out, but it's kind of where they hit this wall of, well, we just don't understand.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like the Catholic, or I should just say the Christian. Well, no, the Christian who accepts divine simplicity, I'll say.
Yes.
The Christian who accepts divine simplicity is kind of backed into this I don't want to say cognitive dissonance, because that's like too negative of a term, but like the Christian who accepts divine simplicity is forced to reckon with this mystery, and kind of to some extent just surrender and say like, yeah, man, it's a mystery. I don't know. And I think that the theists who are kind of happy to say, yeah, like the Old Testament, like it didn't actually happen. Like it's, the Old Testament is 5th, 6th, 7th century Hebrew propaganda. Like it's don't worry about it. Like don't worry about it. That to me just seems like a much easier, like it solves all these problems. You know what I mean? So for me, it just seems like it's a lot more likely to be the case. Like the latter is a lot more likely than the former. But if I was somebody committed to the stance of the former, I would have to do exactly what we just said. So, like I understand why the Christian who accepts divine simplicity winds up at that solution. I just think it's kind of like it will leave me frustrated. I mean, apparently it left me so frustrated that I stopped accepting it. Right.
Yeah.
But if I was kind of committed to it for other reasons, then I would do exactly that move. So like, you know what I'm saying? Like you get me signed up for everything prior, and then I make that exact same move too. I'm right there with you. I just don't feel the need to actually endorse the doctrine of divine simplicity or the truth of the Old Testament or anything like that.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair enough. It would be very weird for me to be like, hey, man, you have to believe divine simplicity now. I'm going to convince you of this, but you don't even necessarily believe in the same God that I do. Or like, hey, Mary was sinless. Believe that. She was completely perfect, but you don't have to believe in Jesus. That would be a weird thing for me to be arguing. The thing is, I love these conversations, these laid back conversations, because it's like, you disagree with me. Okay, I'm learning from like parsing all of this out. This is a conversation I've never had before. Hopefully I'm sharing a perspective with you. I don't know if I'm necessarily teaching you anything, but it's just fun stuff.
For the record, you are. And I learn new things with every single conversation that I have, including conversation with like a 4-year-old. You learn something new every single time that you talk to somebody. Sometimes I'll I've had Jimmy Aiken on my channel. I've had Brian Holdsworth on my channel. I've had Swan Sona. I've had, and people will sometimes ask me like, Kevin, after that conversation, are you closer to, and they'll typically say like, are you closer to coming home? Are you closer to crossing the Tiber? Are you closer? They'll phrase it in these ways, which, does kind of, I think it's the wrong way of thinking about things, but regardless, my answer is always yes, of course. Like, how could you, unless of course you talk to somebody who's like so vile that you're just completely repelled by, like, I want nothing with this person, right? But unless that's the case, then every conversation that I have with somebody is moved me in some direction, unless I'm just sitting here plugging my listening to you, right? Like, and what's the point of having a conversation then? Every conversation moves me, at least in some small way. The conversation with the 4-year-old might only move me this much, and the conversation with you might move me this much, right? But my point is that I learn, you teach me, and everybody I have a conversation with teaches me. And I think it's really short-sighted to try to, and maybe it's even like really prideful to try to say, no, I spoke to insert your favorite person here and they didn't convince me of anything. I think that's your hubris talking. And I think that if you're honest with yourself, I think that your opinions change a little bit, at least after every single conversation. At least that's how it is for me. So
Yeah, no, I think, and this is kind of like a full circle thing. We're coming back to trashing on like debate bro culture, where it's like, in my recent debate with needgod.net, I put on this debate persona every time I go up against like a big opponent. And I hate doing that.
You almost have to for him because that's his persona too, you know? So
yeah, he's and in the most charitable Christian way possible, he's pretty slimy. And it's hard to get him to answer a question. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go up, I'm going to debate in front of 50,000 people. I better represent Catholicism well and actually show why I believe the things I do. But I don't think Ryan walked away from that saying, wow, Noah made some good points. And honestly, I don't think I walked away thinking, wow, Ryan made some good points there. And that's tragic because that was two Christians talking to each other about what we believe, a very important topic, in my opinion. And nobody learned from each other. Nobody listened to each other. And that's pretty sad for me. And so I like debating because a lot of times it will provide something for somebody watching, but in the moment it just feels, and honestly, anti-Christian to a certain extent. And so that's something I'm kind of battling with, is like, okay, how can I do these formal debates in a way that is productive for people watching, but also Christ-like for the people involved? And that's a very tricky thing.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I'll say that a few years ago, I think I was a lot more gung-ho on I want to have these structured debates. And like today, I'm at the point where like, if somebody, I've been invited to do structured debates, and every single time I'm like, can we just have a conversation? And sometimes people are like, no, I really prefer the structure. And sometimes I'm like, okay, like, and if I really want to talk to that person, I'll say, sure, we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't, sometimes I'm like, then find somebody else. Like I'm not a debate bro. I'm not interested in scoring points. I'm not interested in like, I care about this stuff, you know, like I want to know what's true and I want to believe what's true. And I want to not believe what's not true. And like, you know, I just don't think that the debate bro culture is very good at doing that. You know, I think that having a conversation, like, you know, and like having a beer with the conversation is even better. Not for you, not yet.
Not for me.
You've never had beer, not even once.
I've never looked at beer before.
No, what's beer? But you get my point. It's I think that conversations, debate bro conversations where nobody moves away moved, you might as well have not even had the conversation. What's the point? But conversations where you feel at, like, I feel totally at liberty to be like, oh my gosh, wait, excellent point. I completely take back what I said 5 minutes ago. I could absolutely do that in this conversation right now. I probably couldn't do that in like an official debate. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
you wouldn't look very good if you're like,
right,
this is why you're wrong. Oh, wait, maybe not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's why conversations are better than debates. Okay. I'll get off my soapbox now. That's you've heard me say the same thing 5 times, but
I really like saying that because I think it's something that people need to hear. Christians, I'm worried about the way that it's going. I try to make a lot of lighthearted content. I think I've somewhat sacrificed a little bit of that to be like, I'm going to debate people that I disagree with now. And yeah, again, we're talking about the same thing again. But yeah, I think it's something that the Christian community as a whole needs to recognize, is like, or not even just Christians, everyone needs to recognize this. It's not necessarily about, I need to be right. Let's learn from each other, because we all know things that the other person doesn't necessarily know.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I better get going. I've kept you for about an hour and a half. If you're interested in any kind of like PBC type stuff, I have like a 30-minute long video on my channel where I cover the PBC stuff. and why I think that it's problematic. If you ever wanted to watch that video and then like kind of give me your thoughts on it, I would be thrilled to get your thoughts on that video. And hey, if you're busy engaging with Protestants and the PBC doesn't really come up, yeah, that's also cool. I'm into all these like really weird nerdy topics that nobody else cares about. Like nobody cares about the BBC, but it's my weird little fixation. So I'm never offended if people are like, no, Kevin, that's fine. You can have the BBC to yourself. So yeah, but if you do ever watch it, I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I'm super interested. And that's kind of the thing, is the super niche ones, like the super like small contradictions. Those are the ones that get people. Like you can talk Vatican II versus Florence, or the Council of Constance. Like, oh, look, see, it all falls apart. But like that PBC one, I'll be honest, it stumped me. Like I'm not exactly sure. I don't know.
You don't
all
know
the
about it. Don't say that it's stumped you yet. It's just this is the first time that you're hearing about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, for the moment, I'm stumped.
Okay.
If the things that you said are true and there's no outside context, and it was phrased exactly in that way, I'm somewhat stumped right now. I'm sure as an apologist, a slimy, evil apologist, I'll be able to figure my way out of this one. So you guys don't need to worry about me not becoming Catholic. But it's a very interesting thing. I like those niche, nerdy things that we can look into.
If you're interested in another one, and I do want to run, so I'll keep this very brief. But another one that I do is an argument from the canonization of Juan Diego.
Okay.
So what I do is I say that Saint Juan Diego was canonized in like 1999 or 2000 or whatever. And then I point to that DDF document that we talked about earlier that says that canonizations are infallible. So I say, cool, the Catholic Church infallibly canonized Juan Diego. Then I say Juan Diego likely did not exist as a historical person. I lay out the arguments for why I don't think that he existed as a historical person. Okay, great. So we have the church infallibly canonized somebody who likely didn't exist. And then I say the one true church would likely not canonize somebody infallibly if that person never existed. The Catholic Church did canonize somebody infallibly who likely never existed. Therefore, the Catholic Church is not the one true church. The reasons why I don't think that Juan Diego existed as a historical person are long, and I have like another 30-minute long video where I just go through the reasons. My main source for that is ironically a Catholic priest. Maybe not ironically, because a lot of the best historians are Catholic. But his name is Father Poole. And so I read this Father Poole book where I think that he pretty convincingly shows that Juan Diego is like a product of like 100 years after he would have lived. So yeah, I'm such a where did I put it? I almost grabbed these two books, but these are both Fatima books, not Juan Diego books. Give me 1 second. I'm going to see if I can grab a book real quick to show you before I go. But awesome. It's cool because it has Nahuatl text in it. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Yeah, guys, this guy's awesome. This is just super interesting stuff. I'll probably make a video on the PBC thing. That's super interesting.
Here it is. This book, The Story of Guadalupe. It's by Father Stafford Poole and some other scholars, Sousa and Lockhart. But most of this book, so it's not a very big book, right? Most of this book is actually just the Hue Tlamohuecoltica, which, all right, ready? So this much of the book is like actual scholarship about the Hue Tlamohuecoltica. This is the Hue Tlamohuecoltica.
Okay.
And what this is you can see, will the camera focus?
Okay, I see really. Santa Maria.
So on one side, it should be Nahuatl, and on the other side, it should be English. Because so let's see. If we go to like the top of this page, this is like the introduction to the Hue Tlamohuecoltica. So right here, you should see "O Heavenly Queen," right? And then over here, it says "O Heavenly Queen," but in Aztec, in
interesting.
Nahuatl. And so this is the story. And so you might not have heard of the Hue Tlamohuecoltica, but most people who know about Juan Diego know about the Nican Mapahua. And if you can see, the Nican Mapahua is like written at the top of the page right there.
Okay.
And the Nikan Mapahua, a lot of people say that it was written in like the 1500s, and Juan Diego lived in the 1500s. But I think that it was written in 1649 by Bachelor Luis Lasso de la Vega, whose name is right here.
Okay.
You can't read that, can you?
No, I believe
Not
you
focusing.
that it says that.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just a big Guadalupe nerd too. I'm a big Fatima nerd, Guadalupe nerd. Yeah. So that's if you're interested in another random nerdy topic, I think that the canonization of Juan Diego is like a good reason to be suspicious of the authority of the Catholic Church.
Well, I have you on Instagram, correct?
Yes.
I believe we sent some messages to each other. Do me a favor, send me a link to that book that you just showed me, and then I'll go watch those videos because I'm very intrigued by all of this. This is very, very cool stuff.
I absolutely will. This book unfortunately doesn't exist online, but I did scan a decent amount of it, so I can send you the scans.
It doesn't exist online. Where did you get it from? Do you have like a dealer?
No, I just mean there's no PDF of it online. Like, so
okay,
I bought it on Amazon. I bought it on like thriftbooks.com or something.
That's my favorite website, like in the world.
I love thrift books. But like this is what I do to books sometimes. So like this book, it's a Fatima book by Father Stanley L. Yockey. I literally sit there with a knife and I cut the pages out so that I can scan them.
Interesting.
And then I scan the book. And then I run it through like an OCR tool, optical character recognition. And then it kind of like creates a PDF of the book for me. But then I actually have to like go, because like it makes mistakes, right? So I go through the book and like as I'm reading it, I'm like formatting it and stuff. So that's like how I read some of these books is like I scan them in and then I do that.
Can you maybe explain to me why you prefer the PDF version over just the actual book?
Control F.
Okay.
You can search it.
Okay.
It's like sometimes I want to know, like, where does Father Yockey talk about the O Seculo article, right? Like the famous O Seculo. That's like a newspaper in Fatima, right? So I might just want to be able to Control F for O Seculo because no chapter might be called like, hey Kevin, here's that newspaper clip that you really wanted to read.
Yeah.
So it's literally just it's easier to read on a PDF because you can Control F if you forget something and you need to look it up. That's
wow. Man, that's some scholarly stuff. I've never knifed a book before. I've read books, but I've never knifed them.
It feels wrong, and you can see that I'm halfway through this book, right? So I'm going one chapter at a time, cutting them out, scanning them, OCR, and it always feels wrong.
Like, I bet.
But like so when I'm done with this one, I can just send you the book. You know, like I can just be, boop, here you go. Here's the PDF. And then I don't have to tell you go buy this book on Thrift Books. I can just send you the book. You know. Because I like to share books with people because some people are weird about books and they're like, no, you have to go buy it. And I'm like, no, like share the information. But especially because Father Yockey has passed away. This book came out in 1991. So this book is 30 whatever years old. It's older than I am. So like I don't feel bad about sending somebody like a PDF of the book. Like, if it's a brand new book, support the author. I'm a big reader, right? I love that's all fiction too. Like that's all. I'm a big reader. Support authors. Support your local library.
Heck yeah. Well, but I'll shoot you a DM before you go. Two things. One, I think our buddy Cade is in the chat here.
Oh, knifing books is against natural law. I agree.
And I want to have him up, but unfortunately I have to go personally. Maybe I can leave my stream on. You guys can just talk it up.
No, I have to run too.
Yeah. But I would like to request you. Can you give us, if you could have everybody watching this read 5 books, any 5 books of your choosing, which ones would you choose? Because I think this tells you a lot about a person. What 5 books they would tell people to read. So I would love to hear what you think.
Okay, man. So the first book would probably be The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. It is fiction. It is fantasy. However, It is probably so it's a story about bad people who've done terrible things who are in the process of becoming better. It's also the story of young men who have had terrible things happen to them, and they almost take their own lives in sadness, but they don't. It's a story of hope. It's a story of loss. It's excellent. So that's the first one. I know that's not what you're asking. You were, but that's
No,
my answer.
that's great. No, that's one. Do you have four more,
Okay.
or is that
Yeah.
the one?
An Introduction to the New Testament. It's a book by a Catholic priest. It's Father Raymond E. Brown. He's like pretty much I love Father Raymond E. Brown. But I think that a lot of somebody like me, if I was if I was a little bit younger when I read that book, I would have like thrown it against a wall and hated it, because Father Raymond D. Brown admits to a lot of like things that I was uncomfortable with. But I think it's like really important for everybody who's interested in Christianity at all to have a solid understanding of where current scholarship sits. And I think that Father Raymond D. Brown does a really good job of it. And the book has a nihil obstat, a nothing objectionable. So like any Catholic should feel free to read this book and not worry that they're reading like liberal modernist slop or whatever. So that'll be a second book. A third book, just because I am a big fan of Guadalupe, will actually be a different book by Father Stafford Poole. So it's not this book, it's a different book. And it's called Our Lady of Guadalupe, The Origin of a National Mexican Symbol. So if you're interested in Guadalupe, check out that book. A book that I read recently, switching gears to the Old Testament, that I found really cool, was called On the Origin of the Pentateuch, On the Origin of the Torah, On the Origin of the, let me find it. But it's by Dr. Joel Baden. Dr. Joel Baden is secular. He's Jewish by ethnicity, but he's a scholar of the Old Testament. And what Dr. Baden is doing in this book is talking about something called the documentary hypothesis, which I think is very misunderstood by your average Christian. That might not be fair. It's misunderstood by a lot of like the more conservative types of Christians, I should say.
Yeah, like your Southern Baptist, like
yes,
solo scriptura type of guys.
Yes, yes. The documentary hypothesis is lambasted by people like that, and I think extremely unfairly. And I think that if you read Dr. Baden's book, you'll come away with a much more nuanced and like a better appreciation of the documentary hypothesis for the Old Testament.
Okay. Quick disclaimer. Cade is in the chat saying that I'm trying not to react when Kevin said Jewish. That's not true. I have nothing against Jewish people. Ignore whatever the heck that comment is. Okay, continue.
And then for my fifth and final book, I'm going to list another fantasy book. It's called The Sword of Kaigan. I just finished it like 2 weeks ago. It absolutely wrecked me. It is the story of a mother and a son. And it's the story of loss. It's grief. And it's man, I don't want to give too much of it away. But like I don't cry like ever. Like I can count on one hand the amount of times that I've cried in the last 10 years. And this book made me almost cry. Like I didn't quite cry, but man, this book was brutal. And if you are a parent, heads up, this book is extremely like I don't have kids. But if I did, I think this book would have even hit me harder. So there it is. There's 5.
Okay. That was one of the most interesting and versatile lists I've ever received from that question. Very, very good answers. Thank you so much for coming up. This was an unexpected hour and 40-minute conversation, but I would not have rather spend my night any other way. This was really fun.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's always a blast talking to And so here we go. It's always a blast talking to you and folks like you. And I'm including folks like Jimmy Aiken, folks like Dr. Jim Madden, folks like Swan Sona, all of whom I've had on my channel before. So I always love opportunities to have conversations with all my Catholic friends. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, and God bless, man.
All right. Thanks again.
All right. Yep.
Bye.
Well, that was unexpected and awesome. Thank you so much to Kevin for coming on. Hopefully we can get Cade or Gay Extrad up here on our next live stream. But thank you everyone for watching, and God bless.